Oh, nice. So today we're diving into some pretty heady stuff.
Yeah.
We're tackling excerpts from Kenneth Burke's A Rhetoric of Motives.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of it?
I have heard of it.
You know that book you've always meant to read?
Right.
This is it.
This is one.
We're gonna get to the need to know nuggets today,
Okay.
especially the way Burke uses like everything from the Bible to like pop culture
Yeah.
to explain how rhetoric really works.
Yeah.
And to guide us through all of this, we have our expert who can like break down
Oh, wow.
even the densest theories, I think, without breaking a sweat.
Well, Burke can be a little bit of a brain workout, that's for sure.
Yeah,
But the insights are worth it.
I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
So for those who hear rhetoric and think it's just about speeches, like buckle up.
Yeah.
What are we really going to uncover today?
You're going to see how Burke goes way beyond persuasion. We're talking about how we relate to each other. We find common ground, even in opposition.
Oh.
Think about like superhero rivalries.
Oh, interesting.
Those are totally rhetorical.
Okay.
And even how something like slang can be a form of transformation.
Okay, now that's a twist. I'm very intrigued.
Yeah.
But let's back up for a sec.
Sure.
Who exactly was Kenneth Burke?
Yeah.
And why should we care what he has to say?
So Burke was a big deal in the world of 20th century rhetoric.
Okay.
Think of him as kind of like a detective of language,
Mm.
always digging into the why behind the what of communication.
So he wasn't just analyzing speeches. He was trying to figure out the hidden forces that make us say the things we say. Hi.
And he did it in a really unique way.
Yeah.
Blending literary analysis with rhetorical theory,
Uh-huh.
we're going to be looking at how he uses the story of Samson and Delilah.
Oh, wow.
Talk about a power struggle
Yeah.
to illuminate these concepts.
Okay, so we've got biblical drama, we've got hidden forces.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see why he's considered such a groundbreaking thinker, but
Yeah.
where do we even begin to unpack all of this?
A great place to start is with one of Burke's key concepts,
Okay.
animus.
Animus.
Yeah, think of it as like the underlying feeling
Right.
or intention driving our communication.
Okay.
It's the fuel behind our words and our actions.
So, like, if I'm ranting about my favorite sports team losing, my animus might be disappointment, even if I'm trying to play it cool.
Exactly. And Burke would say that understanding someone's animus is crucial for effective communication.
That's true.
Right. Whether you're navigating a disagreement with your partner, or you're pitching an idea at work,
Oh, yeah.
or even just trying to make sense of a news article,
Yeah.
recognizing the animus can be a game changer. Right?
Totally.
It's about seeing beyond the surface and understanding the why behind the message.
It makes you a more insightful communicator yourself.
Yes.
Because if you're aware of your own animus, you can communicate more authentically and effectively.
100%. And this is where it gets even juicier. Burke argues that animus isn't fixed.
Okay.
It's shaped by the context of the situation.
Oh, interesting.
And he gives this example of humor, right?
Okay.
The same joke, told with different intentions in different situations,
Right.
can land in totally different ways.
Oh, tell me about it. A playful jab between friends could be a total disaster if you said it to your boss.
Exactly.
Right.
And Burke actually uses this very example, a humorous statement versus a humorless one,
Okay.
to show how context can be the difference between diffusing a tense situation or escalating it,
Wow.
even if the underlying animus is the same.
That's really interesting.
It's the interplay of all these elements, right? The
Yeah.
words, the tone, the setting, the relationships involved.
It's not just about the words.
Really.
Context is everything.
You got it. And that leads us to two more of Burke's big ideas.
Okay.
Transformation and identification.
Okay.
Remember those superhero movies we talked about?
Yes.
Get ready, because this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, you've piqued my interest. What do superheroes have to do with rhetoric?
So think about those epic battles, like Superman versus Lex Luthor or Batman versus the Joker.
Right.
These stories are so captivating because they tap into this fundamental idea of transformation through opposition.
Okay.
We see the hero and the villain locked in this struggle, and each pushing the other to change, to evolve.
You can't have one without the other.
Exactly.
They define each other, and that's what gets us, like, hooked on their journey.
Exactly. And Burke argues that we're drawn to these stories because we identify with that struggle, that process of transformation.
Yeah.
Even if it's happening in a fictional world,
Yeah.
it resonates with something deep within us.
So it's not just escapism. It's like we're connecting with something fundamentally human.
Precisely. And
Yeah.
here's the really cool part. Burke's point is that identification isn't just about agreeing with someone. It's about recognizing shared experiences, values, even fears, even in opposition.
That's interesting, because, you could vehemently disagree with someone's political views,
Totally.
but still find common ground in the fact that you both care deeply about your country's future.
Absolutely. And that's the crux of what Burke calls consubstantiality.
No, that's a mouthful.
It is a bit of a mouthful, but the idea itself is actually pretty straightforward.
Okay.
It's about how we can be both united and divided at the same time.
Oh, okay. I'm listening. Give me an example.
Think about the rivalry between PC and Mac.
Okay.
They're constantly trying to outdo each other, but they also exist within the same world, the world of computers.
Yeah.
That shared context, that's consubstantiality.
Okay.
They're different, even opposed in some ways, but they're connected by this shared space.
So even in competition, there's this understanding, this common ground.
Right, and Burke would argue that consubstantiality is essential for any society to function.
Okay.
We have to find ways to cooperate, even with those that we may disagree with.
Which brings us to, as Burke puts it, the ultimate disease of cooperation.
Yes.
War.
War. It's tragic, right?
It is.
This idea that the same capacity for cooperation, for identification that binds us together, can also be twisted to lead to the most destructive forms of conflict.
So it's not just an absence of cooperation, it's like cooperation gone wrong.
It's
people working together
towards a destructive goal.
toward a destructive goal.
Exactly, and he's not glorifying conflict here.
No.
What he's showing is how even the most destructive acts are still at their core human acts, driven by these same forces of motivation and identification that shape all of our interactions.
It's a pretty sobering thought, but I guess the question is, if we can understand these forces, can we learn to use them for good instead of evil?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And I think Burke would say yes.
Okay.
But it takes conscious effort,
Yeah.
critical thinking,
Yeah.
and a willingness to really look beyond the surface.
Well, on that note, I think we've given our listeners a lot to chew on already.
We definitely have, but we're just getting started.
Ooh.
Stay tuned, because we're about to take a deep dive into Burke's ideas about slaying as transformation, the ethical implications of identification,
Okay.
and how all of this plays out in our everyday lives.
Now, I can't wait to hear about this whole slaying business. You've got my attention.
Right.
So don't go anywhere, listeners. We'll be right back after this.
All right, so before we got too far, we were about to unravel this whole slaying thing.
Yeah.
And I got to be honest, it's got me a little nervous.
Right.
What exactly did Burke mean by that?
Yeah.
It sounds kind of intense for a rhetoric book, don't you think?
It does sound dramatic, but stick with me.
Okay.
It's actually really insightful. When Burke talks about slaying, he's not talking about literal violence.
Okay.
He's using it as a metaphor for overcoming something, changing it, even destroying it to make way for something new.
Oh, okay, so like a symbolic slaying.
Exactly.
I can get on board with that. It's like that whole out with the old, in with the new idea,
Yeah.
but maybe with a little more punch to it.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not just about passively letting go. It's about actively confronting something,
Okay.
battling it, and in the process, transforming ourselves.
So how does this tie back to identification?
Ooh, good question.
Which I'm remembering was a big part of our conversation in the first half of our deep dive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great question, and it gets at the heart of what Burke is getting at. He suggests that sometimes we project the things we want to change within ourselves.
Okay.
Maybe negative traits, fears, desires, onto someone or something else.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
It's like those villains in those superhero movies we were talking about earlier.
Exactly.
They embody the things we might fear or want to eliminate within ourselves.
Right.
And by confronting them, even if it's just in a fictional story, we're engaging in a kind of symbolic slaying.
You nailed it.
Wow.
It's like facing our shadow selves,
Wow.
but with capes and explosions.
Right.
Burke argues that by confronting those figures, whether it's in fiction or in real life,
Yeah.
we're working through those internal conflicts and ultimately transforming ourselves in the process.
So it's not just about defeating this external enemy, it's about confronting and integrating parts of ourselves.
Yes.
Like therapy, but way more entertaining.
I like that way of putting it.
Right.
And here's another thought to chew on. Burke also highlights that even in something like documentary filmmaking,
Okay.
which aims to be objective, right?
Yeah.
There's an inherent element of choice and perspective.
That's so true, because, like, the filmmaker still chooses what to include,
Exactly.
what to leave out, how to edit the footage. There's always a perspective, even if it's subtle.
Precisely. And I think that's such an important reminder, especially today,
Yes.
when we are constantly being bombarded with information.
Yeah.
Burke's work encourages us to be like critical consumers of information.
Yeah. Yeah.
To ask ourselves, who's telling the story?
Yeah.
Why are they telling it?
Right.
And how might our own biases be influencing how we're receiving it?
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've
Like,
talked about identification, transformation, substantiality, slaying. It's a lot to process.
It's a lot.
But where does this leave us, like, in terms of actually using rhetoric effectively in our own lives?
Yeah.
It feels almost like Burke is giving us, like, X-ray vision into how communication works.
Yeah.
But, like, what do we do with that knowledge?
That's a great analogy, that X-ray vision. And you're right. It's not just about seeing through things,
Yeah.
but seeing through them to understand how they're put together, what makes them tick.
Right.
Once you start seeing those patterns,
Yeah.
you start to notice them everywhere.
It's like a whole new world opens up. But it
Yeah.
also feels like a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
You know, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
It's a one-way door.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good thing, that awareness, that critical eye. It's more important than ever. It allows us to be more conscious, more ethical, and ultimately more skillful communicators.
I completely agree. So if we wanted to put all of this into practice, what would be, like, a good first step? Where do we even begin?
That's a great question. And I think for Burke, it all starts with self-awareness.
Okay.
We have to be mindful of our own motives, our own biases,
Right.
the ways in which we might be maybe unconsciously
Yeah.
using rhetoric to manipulate or control others.
It's like they say, the first step is admitting you have a problem.
Exactly. But it's not just about admitting fault, right?
Right.
It's about cultivating a sense of responsibility
Yeah.
for the ways in which we use language, the stories we tell, the connections we forge.
Because ultimately, those connections have real-world consequences.
Yeah.
They can bring us together.
They can tear us apart.
Yeah, tear us
Yeah.
apart, or even shape entire societies.
You said it. And
Yeah.
that's why it's so important to use this newfound awareness thoughtfully, to approach communication with intention and with integrity.
With intention and integrity. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like we've been given this, like, powerful toolkit,
Yeah.
but now we have to figure out how to use it responsibly.
Right.
It's both exciting and a little daunting, don't you think?
Absolutely. But I think that's where the real magic happens, right?
Okay.
It's not enough to just understand these concepts intellectually.
Yeah.
The real challenge and the real reward
Yeah.
comes from actually putting them into practice in our own lives.
So where do we even begin?
Right?
Like, how do we take all of this amazing insight about, like, animus and identification and consubstantiality
Yeah.
and actually make it work for us in our daily interactions?
Well, I think one of the most powerful takeaways from Burke's work is just this reminder that rhetoric is everywhere.
That's true.
You know,
Mhm.
it's not just something that politicians and advertisers use.
Right.
It's woven into the fabric of our everyday conversations, our relationships, even our internal monologues.
It's true. Like, once you start seeing the world through this lens, you realize just how pervasive it really is.
Exactly. And that awareness is key
Oh,
because it allows us to start making more conscious choices about how we participate in these rhetorical exchanges.
so it's not just about analyzing other people's rhetoric. It's
Correct.
about becoming more aware of our own.
Precisely. It's about asking ourselves, what's my intention here?
Okay.
Am I trying to connect authentically, or am I trying to manipulate the situation to get what I want? Am I being mindful of the other person's perspective, or am I just focused on getting my point across?
Those are tough questions,
They are tough questions,
but important to ask ourselves.
but they're the kind of questions that lead to real growth,
yeah.
both personally and relationally.
I love that. It's
Yeah.
like by understanding rhetoric, we're not just becoming, like, better communicators, we're becoming better human beings.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately what makes Burke's work so enduring, so relevant, right?
Right.
It's not just about analyzing language. It's about understanding what it means to be human,
Totally.
to connect, to persuade, to build bridges across differences.
It's a pretty incredible legacy when you think about it.
It really is. And I think we're all still grappling with the implications of his work, especially
Yeah.
today. You know, in a world where technology has amplified the reach and power of rhetoric, in ways I don't think Burke could have ever imagined.
It's true. Wow, we could do a whole deep dive on that.
Right.
On that note.
Yeah.
I think we should start to wrap things up.
Okay.
Any final words of wisdom before we sign off?
Just this. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.
I love that.
Because I really do believe that the more we understand about rhetoric,
Yeah.
the better equipped we'll be to navigate the complexities of human connection
Yes.
and create a more just and compassionate world.
That's beautifully said. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of Kenneth Burke.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you've walked away with some new insights and a renewed appreciation for the power of language to shape our lives and our world. Until next time, happy listening.